You're listening to Nurturing Parents, the official podcast of the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. Here, we hold space for real conversations at the intersections of parenting, spirituality, and justice. With each episode, we bring together experts, everyday parents, and advocates to explore how we can raise the next generation with purpose, intention, and love. So whether you're tuning in from a quiet moment of rest or in the middle of the beautiful chaos of family life, take a deep breath and let's journey together. Hello, my name is Nettie, and I'm a co-director for the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. I'm so excited to have Wendy Reynoso Moore here with us today. Wendy is a licensed clinical social worker with 17 years of experience in providing clinical therapeutic services and developing community programs for underserved communities in Los Angeles County. So thank you so much, Wendy, for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're very excited to talk more with you about what mental health looks like for parents and caregivers of children and ways we can support our mental well-being as we raise our kids and just navigate the stresses and challenges of day-to-day life. But to get us started, if you're willing to share a little bit about why you think parenting is such an important task or responsibility.
It's huge. I'll start with what got me into this interest. Part of it really was I've had a wonderful upbringing myself. So kudos to my parents, my family, the way that we've handled challenges as a family together. So I really had beautiful models of what love and nurturance looks like. So as I grew up and seeing the importance of those relationships and seeing the beauty of helpers, it really does make a difference in the way that you connect with the world and people around you. So, having caregivers, parents, relatives, just communities that take care of you. However, the way that we utilize the word parents should be loose in the sense of who are the adults around you as kids that support you. It really builds a society, in the environment that we live in. It's a huge responsibility and it has ripple effects that we get to see and not see, but generations see in the future. It's important. So the work that I do, that other people do, that we're all inspired by, we know that it makes a difference. At least for me personally, too, as I became a mom, it became even more of an initiative, to help foster a world that's safe, supportive, and nurturing for my own kids. That's the reason why this work is so important and how it has a huge impact in our everyday lives, really.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I just feel like it's so helpful and important to remind ourselves and our communities that parenting is one of the most valuable work that we could offer in our life and in the
Mhm.
world. And parenting and raising children is often just taken for granted by society at large. It's assumed we just do it and we just know how to do it. But when we can name how important it is and support each other in it, like you were saying, there are ripple effects in how we raise our children collectively. When we are so intentional and aware of this importance of raising our kids, we bring a better world for future generations. So thank you for bringing that, and thank you for all that you're doing to support families in the work that you do. Since you do have a lot of experience working with parents and caregivers of children and families, what are some of the challenges you see parents facing today?
It's a lot of stress, whatever is happening with maybe economic situation, social climate, and how we all manage it as caregivers. And so the way that we experience whatever's happening, whatever challenges we have, a lot of the times that we tend to see and relate to is not only how we manage it for ourselves, but the stress also is projected into our kids, onto our kids. And so the way that we are filtering the world, the way that we reason what's happening, the way that we react, it inevitably ends up falling into the way that we parent. And so that's the stressors of everyday life. But now that we are in the last several years, it's been very tough with the consequences of the pandemic. We still see it because we knew and anticipated that the financial stressors of a lot of folks that have lost their home, their jobs, and things of that nature They're life changing with the losses that they've experienced, with deaths, as well as having to relocate completely. People have been uprooted. So, when you're dealing with all of this, how do you cope with it while also having to be as calm and patient with your kids? And so, the biggest challenge, I think, for all of us is how do we best handle the stress, and how do we develop some coping strategies that are going to be beneficial, even coping individually as people, but also relying on other people too, and giving yourself a lot of grace, being very self aware about what's going on. And that's hard, having to look in the mirror when you feel like, well, I don't have time for that. I have all these other responsibilities to try to take care of. And it does get very hard. So I feel like in the last several years, it's been a lot of that. And so we have seen the impact more so on youth because of that. And so folks are coming in with all of these concerns with their family dynamics and like systems and things that just has increased. And so we do see that concern. And so the discussion of how we manage stress isn't always present for parents. As caregivers, it's almost placed aside. And if you speak to people one on one, I guarantee you, most of the time, most people are going to say, I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. It's such a common experience. And so part of that is just learning and knowing that you're constantly learning and changing with your kids. And that in itself is already stressful. Imagine having to deal with everything else in society and your circumstances on top of that. That's a really big weight to hold. And so that's something that I've seen as this common foundational trend constantly is all of these factors and how we even cope with it as individual people, as parents, and as a community too. How are we leaning into each other? How are we even accepting help? Because what does it mean as a parent to ask for help? So, figuring out what definition people have for that or what answer they have for that results in the decision that someone makes.
That makes a lot of sense to me to hear about the stress that we've experienced as a whole, as a society. This unique time we're living in these last few years, like you mentioned. As parents, we're trying to make sure we have the bills paid, the
Mm.
light, warm water in the home, there's food on the table. And then our kids are trying to, learn and grow in their school communities and their programs. And there's so much that we're trying to hold as the parents of our families. I heard you talk about how important it is to be able to ask for help and lean into community. It just really leads me to think about how easy it is in our world, in our country, in our society, in the United States, the context I'm speaking from. It's so easy to be focused on the individualistic pursuit of success and focus on the nuclear home life. We have ability to be connected to each other through technology, through internet, and yet so many of us feel alone or isolated as parents and caregivers.
Mhm.
And so I guess I'm thinking about how there are probably practices you could offer to our community that we can do on our own to help us cope with our day to day. And there's probably practices that can help us not do it alone, ways that we can be reminded or encouraged to reach out. And so, if
Mhm.
you're willing to share, maybe we can start with thinking about just you're a parent, you're getting home from work, or you're stay at home, you work from home. What are maybe some practices you could help offer us to take care of our mental health and our well-being? What are some practices you could help offer that help us at least begin with ourselves when we notice we're very stressed?
And I'll share what I do. I've been inspired by other people and having the privilege of being able to not only be their therapist, but individuals open themselves up to you, to their lives. And so you see the resilience in them as well. So we're all learning from each other. So the thing for me, coming home, I have to mentally self-check. What is my emotional battery right now? What can I in fact be present with for other people? And what is it that I need to do for myself to be able to reconnect with myself? Every day is different. We all have days where the stresses are really high, conflicts are present, and there's days where it's like, you know what, this is a really great day. No one asked too much of me today. It's worked out lovely. And so when you do a self check, and I tend to do this mainly when I'm very stressed because it's almost like an innate force process because of the work that I do. It's a blessing and a curse because you become very self aware. I do that check, figuring out how much I can offer. If I know that I can't offer too much, I have to communicate that with the people around me because I don't live by myself. I have a family, friendships, colleagues. Being able to articulate that requires me to take a pause to figure out, where do I stand right now? Do I have energy? Can I recognize what my body is feeling and going through? What is it that I can do right now so that my future self is grateful for any decision that I make? I'm never going to be perfect. And I think that's the other piece, is giving yourself a lot of grace as an individual. That overlaps into the way you perceive your surroundings too, the way you perceive other people, the way you perceive your children. So when you give yourself a sense of grace that, you know what, that thing that I did today, maybe that bag of chips wasn't really ideal today in the moment, but saying, well, it's happened and it was a momentary thing. And what am I going to do next? Being really self conscious of that is very helpful. That does take time. You have to slow down. Some practices of journaling, having to write down what your thoughts are, what your feelings are, so that it's not resulting in a tornado inside. So it's out of control, but you have a space where you're writing down what it is that you're going through in a structured way. I've done things for myself where I have to do it very unfiltered, and then I see what I write and I'm like, okay, you know what? I just needed that. Other times is I've coached other people where when they've written things down for parents when they're having a rough time, the mistake of having to go back and rereading that too much and saying maybe you have to see a ritualized like practice of tearing that page apart and then rewriting where you are now and seeing that as part of your healing process for the day. Everybody's individual, we call it our self-care plans, right? It's going to be different for everybody and it's going to change every single day. As long as there is an understanding as to what fulfills you that day or what's fulfilling you in general, and maybe having a list is a really good practice. I've done that for myself where I have to go back to that list to remind myself, because when you're stressed, you're not consciously aware all the time. Figuring out what are some practices that work for you individually from that list and engaging in that and not waiting for the motivation, but you're actually forcing yourself to make a commitment to do something different until you feel a bit more rejuvenated. I love my hot showers. That is a big thing for me. There's memes I get because we talk about it and I look like a skeleton while in the shower just because I'm burning my skin off. I love the warmth of the shower, having to do some breathing exercises for myself, having to do some meditative practices, even on my phone, looking up things online. Like you said, there's resources online, but using them adequately, calling a friend and just letting them know, I don't want to talk about my day. I just want to hear about you, because sometimes that's all I need. So it's all with intention. How do you do things very intentionally? Even doing that, the intention also reinforces the way it's going to help, not just doing it mindlessly because it's a habit and you're on autopilot. Being on autopilot, it serves its purpose, and at some points and other times it's like, you know what, I really do need to get grounded again. So as individual people, it's going to be different, but those are some of the things, at least for myself as a individual person, looking for new habits or looking for habits in the sense of like new recipes that I want to cook. I like to cook, I have the time, and so that is for individual. But then you talk about, well, what about with other people? So when I mentioned having to talk to a friend, having to talk to my partner, sharing with him what my day is like or what I need from him, because that's the other piece, is that when you are seeking out rejuvenation with other people, the second layer is, are they ready for that? Or are they in the right space for that? And that goes with your friendships and your relationships. Finding a balance with all of that, it's a daily practice. It's an absolute daily practice. So when I have folks that do it for themselves too, It's inspiring and it's a good reminder because we can easily forget because life takes over and the demands of outside take over. So it's important to be able to slow down. So that's my biggest takeaway, or at least to share, is that baseline. Be self aware, work on that self awareness first, more than anything, if at all possible, to pay attention. We have one life, and being able to be present is a huge factor of knowing how to proceed forward.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I really appreciate your response there. I'm thinking about how when I was a parent with my first two young children, those early years as a new parent, there was so much learning happening, and I felt a lot of overwhelm with all the emotions, all the learning. And my family had moved a few times in those early years, and
Mhm.
with all the moves, I remember really struggling. And in my head, I knew that parenting was an awesome thing and I loved being a parent, but in my body and my emotions, I was very unhappy. I just
Mhm.
don't feel joy. I'm just feel so down. And
Mhm.
it was such a struggle. And what you're offering to us to think about, you said the foundation is the self-awareness. Okay, we're parenting our children, so it is easy to focus on our responsibility is to work, to provide, to make sure our kids are good. And then it's so easy to forget about us. So what we're trying to communicate then through, our learning through our conversation here is pay attention to yourself. Like you said, notice. And I love that you shared with us to do a self check and to make that a daily thing
Mhm.
somewhere in your day. So, for all those who are hearing us today, when in your day could you just take a pause to say, okay, how am I really doing? What am I feeling? What is my body feeling? Have I eaten
Mhm.
enough today? Have
Seriously, have I gone to the bathroom? It really is a practice. And your body, at some point, it's going to tell you. It's going to tell you, no, you really got to get a snack or you start feeling dizzy or something. But we don't have to wait until then. You don't get that skill set overnight. There's going to be times where it's just not going to happen. And you just have to remind yourself, like, you know what, this actually used to work. Maybe I need to go back to it. Life is such an ocean. There's waves, there's storms, and all of that. But the whole point for us is how do we stay on the surfboard? How do we keep ourselves on the surfboard so that we're able to manage those waves? We're not drowning. And so that being an understanding of what life really is, not this perfect line of balance. There's no such thing as honestly balance. When we're thinking of balance, maybe internally of how we balance on the surfboard, but externally, there's no perfect line. It's the massive storms that set in because that's what the human experience is like, and also these tranquil waters that tend to happen. And so having folks see life in that way, being able to empathize with your own experience, maybe that can help. But it is that daily practice, and you get better when you practice often, and there's grace for yourself when you don't. And as long as you recognize it, go back to it, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what I'm hearing is we're learning and practicing how to take care of ourselves so that we can better take care of our families, our children. And
Mhm.
I love how you reminded us it's not something you learn overnight. So just be
Mhm.
committed to a lifestyle, to a daily reminder. Do what you can for today. Take care of yourself and what your body's communicating for today. You mentioned earlier to be intentional. And so that's
Mhm.
another thing I'd like to highlight for our audience is when you are doing your self check, you're doing it with the intention of bringing
Mhm.
wellness to yourself and your home. You're doing it with the intention to feel aligned and centered and grounded. There's purpose there. And I think that does help us truly experience the benefits of this is of checking in with ourselves. Just that reminder to be intentional and I think when you have that intention, it can really help guide you on what you might need for that day. You have an inner wisdom. I believe that we all have this inner wisdom. It comes from what I would say is the divine or a sacred source or God, whatever you might call it. We have inner wisdom. And so I think practicing these self check ins help us connect to what's living inside of us that we're not always aware
Mhm.
because we're just so distracted. Our world is a fast-paced, busy world. And
Oh,
so,
yeah, and once the internet came in, it, like, tripled in size with that speed. Yeah, the intention piece of it, even if we were to say, "Okay, this is what I need for myself today. This is what I am looking and seeking out for." There are moments where sometimes even then some folks struggle, and I have it too, where I'm like, I don't know, what is it that I'm looking for? What is my intention today? I mean, I would love to have a sense of centered peace, but it's not my reality right now. Like, what is it that I'm intending for myself today that makes sense and that's realistic too? And so going deeper, that self-reflection piece, and even understanding what is it that prevented you from doing the thing that's going to help you also helps. So maybe the intention of just understanding the choice that you made could be my baseline today. Like, that's my goal. It's just to understand why I did what I did. And that's a success. It's not feeling like you're failing on a day-to-day basis either. For me, that has led me this sense of understanding of, okay, I have to look and reflect on my upbringing. My parents had their flaws like I do and like everyone else. Understanding their sacrifices and what they've done, there was this desire as individuals that were not from this country needing to feel like they have to sacrifice everything, even themselves, to give so much to us. How much we have to take care of ourselves, sometimes it is a conflicting message for a lot of people, 'cause especially if they come from a background or culture where it was very like martyrdom. How do you reconcile that? Because we all parent based off what we've learned. Either we take upon those practices or we don't. But if we don't, there's a reason for it.
wow, that's very helpful. I feel like so many parents and caregivers could relate to noticing how they were raised and how their parents brought them up and realizing, oh, the starting place, the foundation of our home is different. And just learning, what have I been handed and what could I continue and what could I perhaps transform? Because
Hmm.
my home has a different starting place or a different foundation or context. And
Yeah.
I think it is beautiful to honor our parents, our grandparents, honor our lineage, and just knowing that story of what they've been through, why they did what they did, and how it's brought us to where
Hmm.
we are today, honoring their sacrifices, their struggles. And if we do something different, it's not necessarily dishonoring the legacy. If
Exactly.
anything, I think that we are honoring the legacy of growing with each generation. We're
Hmm.
passing on what we keep learning and evolving into hopefully deeper love and deeper fulfillment. So that's just a beautiful reminder that you've offered us. So thanks for that.
We make our choices based off of where we were set up, and having to say, I was able to make this parenting choice as a result of what I learned and where I came from. And reflecting on our past in that framework is helpful, and finding ways to recognize or even create a narrative that's going to serve us, because the story, it's not just black and white. The stories have nuances and has context. And when you look back at your history, we have every control over how we're going to view it. And honoring it is having to recognize it, understand it. That's part of the honoring, having to see it in the context of, this is what was given to me because that's all they knew and that's what they were capable of at the time. We're all doing the best that we can. And the conflict we deal with is that people have different expectations of what best looks like. So if we're giving each other a lot of grace, it's a reflection of how you give grace to yourself, the foundation of where we all came from, and taking pause for that. No matter how old you are, you can always go back and reflect and have conversations with family members, with friends, even with the community about what it was like here years ago. So discovering, being curious, and it's just to be curious. And that's the biggest thing that I teach my kids. You have to be curious, and that helps you not fall into judgment or criticism so quickly. It's just be curious. And that means starting with yourself and then being able to do that within the relationships that you have and with your lineage, your history. It's fun being able to tell them this is what your grandparents and great grandparents dealt with in the historical. You're able to help them form a sense of identity, even when it's stories that are heartbreaking and understandably painful. I share with them you have a blood lineage of resiliency because you are here now. You exist now despite all of that. It means you're a fighter. Your existence matters in that context too.
That's awesome. I think that's really powerful to, again, share the story of our family lineage with our kids. I think about where our families are rooted in whatever lands they come from. Our kids feel connected to that. And it's empowering to know that you're connected to something bigger than what you can see right now. I love the reminder of being curious with yourself. It helps you be able to practice curiosity with your kids. So when you say, okay, why did I do what I did today? Let me just understand why I did that. You are more able to understand your kids' behaviors. Okay, I don't like what my kid did, but let me practice why did they do that? What is it?
Mhm.
What is that behavior trying to show me or communicate?
Yeah.
That right there is huge for us parents. At least just maybe starting there if you don't know where to start. That can bring you really big changes if you make that a consistent practice over time. I have learned in my own experience, it really does take time. If you're consistent with the practices of self-awareness, self-check-ins, over time it becomes more natural. You develop the capacity to do it. And I have been able to see that in my own life, which I'm thankful for. And just finding people to keep supporting us along our journey. And that is so important. One thing that I can't help but share in this next part is not a lot of families, especially those who come from maybe lower income socioeconomic status or immigrant families or different marginalized communities, whether it's BIPOC, LGBTQ plus communities, there's just harder access to find therapy support systemically. And even sometimes in these marginalized communities, there is stigma. Is that the right word? Put
Yeah.
put on those who see a therapist. I come from the millennial generation, and I feel like a lot of my generation were very comfortable saying, "Oh, I see a therapist. I see them
Hmm.
this month. I'm so happy I do. It's so great."
Yeah.
Our parents' generations just what I hear is, I don't need a therapist. I'm fine. It's only people who really have intense issues see a therapist. This is something I've heard in other spaces being talked about. And I just want to encourage our audience and listeners, see if there's programs in your area to make it more accessible to see a therapist. I highly encourage us to support one another in finding that resource and utilizing it. And
Oh, yeah.
your line of work, I don't know if you have anything more you'd want to say about that.
Yeah, so stigma is a correct word, and there is a stigma in a lot of BIPOC community and BTQ plus community, and we've had to contend with it. In part of the work that I do and the work that I not only currently do, but even in the past, the initial process of when folks are engaging in supports and services, we explore with them first what is their feelings about getting help is like a starting point for us to be able to better understand what their expectations are, what their concerns are. And that's where we tend to hear well, either my family doesn't really support it, or I'm coming in, but I'm really not certain because I'm not crazy. And it's always that idea of not crazy. And so part of the talks is having to let people know you're articulating something that society has really pushed in so many years of if you seek mental health it means that you are crazy, and that is problematic because the irony is that when you are speaking to people that care for you, the conversations that you have where you leave feeling, oh, you know what, I understood myself a little bit better there, or I felt healing, that is a small window of what the therapy experience looks like. But the safe part about therapy is that you're speaking to someone who is a neutral party, who has no bias towards your contextual circumstance, who doesn't know and shouldn't know boundaries, right? Personal family member stories and hearing, well, I'm detective now to figure out what's true and what's not. That's not the role of a clinician, of a therapist. And having a neutral space to set this down and not feel a responsibility over the reaction of somebody else is so freeing. Because when you speak to other folks who may give you some of that experience, There's always going to be something there where you're going to feel like, okay, but I feel a little bit responsible for how they're going to react. But when you have a professional, that is their sole purpose, to come in to just give you that space so that you can figure out things for yourself. And we're not coming in and telling you what to do. Sometimes what I tend to hear is the fear of, I'm going to be judged, I'm going to be criticized, I'm going to be told what I'm doing wrong. Now, if anybody's in a therapeutic relationship where that's what their experience is, I would encourage you to follow up and reflect and figure out, is this really helping you? Ideally, it's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be a place where you have an individual that is guiding you, providing you with some insight, questioning, providing you questions so that the person can be self-reflective, so that you can figure out what your answers are that make sense for you. Because, like you said, we all have an internal wisdom of what is going to be helpful for us as people at the right time. Maybe there's a wisdom that you learn about, but it may not sit well right now. It may sit well with you years later. So, part of the therapeutic experience is having that safe space to go deeper and not feel the responsibility, like social convention of like, okay, well, I have to have this person see me in a very good light. And there's no pressure to that. And so, in conversations with the community, we try to ask more about, when have you had some of those glimmers of feeling rejuvenated when you connect with people? Like, what is it about that? So, we hear about when they are connecting with friends, groups at the church, with social groups, having to talk to aunties over cafecito with their little coffee. It's having to recognize, let's take that piece and being able to tell you that in having these moments, imagine taking that outside and saying, you have this glimmer along with everything else that could be supported without having to feel the pressure of, okay, what if so and so thinks that of me and this of me? And it becomes healing. Even in conversations, sometimes for folks, it may feel a little like, okay, well, that's theory, right? Well, there's science behind it. And educating people about the way the body changes with those conversations. The brain reconfigures. There's been actual studies and X-ray images that show these new pathways that happen in the brain. So there is fundamental evidence for it. What's very clear is that it's hard to get it to ask for help because of the fear of being judged, of being criticized. Let's put that out there. If we were to create a space where you will not, with the sole purpose of you coming in, this person will not judge you. Their role and their profession and their training is to not judge you. Having to try it out. And if it works out here, great. If it doesn't, go somewhere else, because everybody deserves a safe, neutral space, and highlighting neutral. And to be understood, to feel understood, more than anything for folks to understand themselves. And conversations have really been I feel like the switch for folks when they are uncertain about asking for help is before they even delve into, okay, let me go ahead and go into this program, or let me do this intake, or having these full-fledged questions, or even just saying yes to help. Okay, well, let me just talk to you in a community setting, in a conversation about what this means exactly, and delving a little deeper. So you almost give like a little taste of what those interactions can be like. And so for folks that are hesitant, that's where we see this acceptance of, okay, yeah, you know what? I am going to try it. Those connections are powerful. And so there is a huge responsibility for clinicians in general in that first point of contact to help individuals feel safe and feel like this is going to help. Not every conversation is going to be ideal. As a therapist, many of us who are trained, we actually have to go to get our own therapy too. It's part of the programming curriculum here in California. And in doing so, I discovered, yeah, no, that does make sense viscerally. I knew it by brain, but by body, it's like, yes, there is a connection that I'm looking for with a particular person. And I went through a few and then I found the one. And that made a world of a difference for me. For people to understand, you have to figure out what your journey is, but having to first understand what therapy is, what asking for support really means for you, and why is it that maybe you're not leaning into it? What is it that your fears are? Can you articulate those fears with people and understanding yourself and what you're concerned about, and then figuring out what the next step is for you? Is it the right time for you? Do you have the right environment that's going to support you with that right now? Is it going to be a priority for you right now? What makes sense for yourself? So, whenever we do community meetings, conversations, even casually with people that I speak to in my life, it's always an opportunity to bring up this idea of what well being means. Sometimes folks have a visceral reaction with the word mental health. And it's like, okay, well, can we give it another word? Because we're essentially talking about human connection and self awareness, and that's an everyday necessity as a human being. And some folks say, yeah, let's talk about it as just connections, or don't even use the word therapy. For some reason, some folks are more comfortable with counseling. It's like, okay, whatever it is, if that's what you need, that's okay. Or, so the stigma, I'll say it's definitely better. It has improved. And I feel like the reason why it's improved, I was out of necessity because of how hard it got when people isolated during the pandemic. When the isolation happened, everybody felt like now I'm stuck doors. I got to figure out myself, like what really matters. So there's becomes this crisis, right? This internal crisis along with everything else. Then the discussions about mental health well-being, now we were kind of forced to actually look in the mirror more. For a lot of folks, it has transformed. Now, the stigma is definitely still there, but it has been transforming more and more. But when it comes to therapy, though, it's when things really go deeper, because you're really slowing down and making an intention throughout your week of, I need to figure out what it is that I need for myself because I am really struggling. I need to understand my history potentially. I need to understand what plan and what goals I need to commit to myself right now, but I need a neutral person to help encourage me for that. And sometimes in our lives, we all need a time to have that person, have that team, and that makes us resilient. It's the absence of all that when we need it that doesn't. Seeing it in the context of help means that we are, in fact, resilient because we're humans that require connection to survive.
So let's keep normalizing this message that we need one another to be well. We can ask each other for help, and that's a good thing. And to see our connections with one another as a way to be resilient and to survive. This idea that you can survive on your own is a myth.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a myth.
It's impossible.
So thank you for that perspective on the power of a neutral space. And that's what the intention is with a therapeutic space or a therapist supporting you, a neutral space where you really have that freedom to be honest, to explore yourself more deeply without the judgment. And it's the potential for deep healing to take place
Mhm.
in your life. So thank you for that, Wendy. That's a beautiful place to land. I appreciate your wisdom and time in this conversation. It's been very fruitful and enriching. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the invite. It was my pleasure.
Is there anything else you would like to say? Do you want to share with folks? Is there anything that our listeners can do to support the work that you're a part of right now?
Maybe just leaning in. It goes back to what we were discussing already, but making a conscious effort to leaning in to yourself and other people. And when there are resources out there, just say yes and follow through for yourself. That is going to make a world of difference, not only for you, but going back to that ripple effect is huge. So as the work that I do, it's leaning in, and accepting the supports around you when they're present and available, giving even understanding that having to say yes to help, it's not it's not always a one way transaction. It's transformational for both parties. Because as a helper, you actually start even more learning about people's experiences and connecting with the humanity of people. Just saying yes, that's all.
Thank you. I love that. So great. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Yeah, you're
I'm
welcome.
gonna
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Nurturing Parents, the official podcast of the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. We hope today's conversation offered you a moment of connection, a spark of insight, or simply a reminder that you are not alone on your parenting journey. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone in your village. Together, we're building a more inclusive future, one conversation and one child at a time. For more information about the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project, visit us at inclusiveparents.org or follow us on social media at radically.inclusive.parents.